The night I found the second phone, I told myself I was being paranoid. 3 weeks later, I'd know that phone was the only honest thing left in my marriage. But not for the reason you're probably thinking. My name is Ryan Castillo, and for 6 years, I believed my wife Nora and I told each other everything. That belief ended on a Tuesday night, at 11:40, when I reached under her side of the mattress to grab a phone charger, and my hand closed around something that wasn't a charger at all. It was a phone. Cheap, older model, the kind you buy with cash and never register to your name. Password locked, of course. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just holding it, listening to Nora breathe evenly beside me, fast asleep, completely unaware that the ground under both of us had just quietly shifted. I didn't wake her. I didn't confront her. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, and I lay awake until sunrise, running through 6 years of memories, searching for the moment things had started slipping without me noticing. Here's what you need to understand about Nora: she wasn't secretive by nature. If anything, she was almost aggressively transparent, the kind of person who told you exactly what she thought whether you wanted to hear it or not. That's part of what made the hidden phone feel so impossible. It didn't just suggest a lie. It suggested a version of my wife I had never once met. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I started noticing things. The way she'd take her coffee out to the porch alone every morning at exactly 6:15, phone in hand, door closed behind her. The way she flinched, just slightly, when my phone buzzed loud enough that she looked up first. The way she started deleting her search history, something she'd never once bothered doing in 6 years of marriage. I started keeping a mental list, the way you do when you've convinced yourself you're building a case instead of just torturing yourself. She'd started wearing perfume on days she said she wasn't seeing anyone important. She'd stopped leaving her phone face up on the kitchen counter, a habit she'd had since the day we met. Twice, I heard her voice through the bathroom door, low and careful, the specific tone people use when they don't want to be overheard, and both times, by the time I found a reason to walk past, she'd already hung up. None of it, on its own, meant anything. All of it together felt like watching a house slowly catch fire from the inside, the smoke curling out from under doors I hadn't thought to check. I told myself I'd catch her. I told myself I deserved to know. So on a Thursday, when she left for what she called a work thing that ran unusually late, I did something I'm not proud of. I followed her. She drove across town, away from her office, into a part of the city I barely recognized, quiet residential streets, older houses, nothing that looked like it belonged to Nora's polished, downtown office life. She parked outside a modest blue house with a wheelchair ramp built onto the porch, and she sat in her car for almost 5 full minutes before going inside. Like she was gathering the courage to walk through that door. I parked half a block away and watched the house for over an hour. Lights on in the front room. 2 shadows moving behind the curtains. At one point, I saw her through the window, sitting close beside someone, her hand resting gently on their arm. When she finally came out, she was crying. Not upset crying. Something quieter than that. She sat in her car for another few minutes before driving home, and I followed at a careful distance, my mind spinning through every worst-case scenario a person can invent at 11 o'clock at night. I almost confronted her that evening. I had the words ready, standing in our kitchen while she hung up her coat, completely unaware I'd followed her across the city. But something stopped me, some instinct telling me I still didn't actually understand what I'd seen. So instead, I asked, as casually as I could manage, how her work thing went. "Fine," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Long day." And then she went to bed, and I stood alone in the kitchen for a long time, holding a truth I didn't have yet, only the shape of one. The blue house became my obsession. I drove past it twice more that week, on my own, telling myself I was just gathering information before I said anything. On the second visit, an older woman was out front, watering plants, and on impulse, I pulled over and asked if she knew who lived there. She looked at me carefully before answering. "The Delgado family," she said. "Sad situation, honestly. The husband had a stroke about 8 months back. Young guy too, 34. His wife's been struggling, from what I hear. Someone's been coming by a few times a week to help out, cooking, sitting with him so she can get a break. Real kind soul, whoever it is." I thanked her and drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel, for entirely different reasons than I'd expected. That night, I finally asked Nora directly. Not with accusation in my voice, I didn't have the energy for that anymore, not after what the neighbor had told me. I just asked her, plainly, who lived in the blue house on Larkspur Street, and watched her face go through about 4 different emotions in the space of 2 seconds. She sat down slowly at the kitchen table. "How do you know about that?" she said. Not really a question. I told her about the phone. About following her. About the neighbor. I expected anger, or panic, or the kind of scrambling explanation people give when they've been caught. Instead, Nora just looked exhausted, in a way I'd never quite seen on her before, and she started, quietly, to explain. The man in that house, David Delgado, had been her closest friend growing up, practically a brother, she said, before their families drifted apart in their 20s the way families sometimes do. She'd reconnected with him by accident, almost a year earlier, at a mutual friend's funeral. 3 months after that reunion, he'd had a massive stroke at 34 years old, leaving him partially paralyzed, unable to work, and his wife Elena drowning under the weight of caregiving almost entirely alone. Nora had started helping. Quietly, at first, a few hours here and there, giving Elena a break, sitting with David while he relearned how to hold a fork, how to form full sentences again. It had grown from there, into something she visited 3, sometimes 4 times a week. "Why the secret phone?" I asked, my voice quieter now than it had been in weeks. She looked down at her hands. "Because David's family is old-fashioned, and complicated, and there was a period, right after the funeral, before any of this happened with his health, where his brother accused me of trying to insert myself back into David's life for the wrong reasons. It got ugly. Threats, actually, some nasty messages, an ex-wife who's still bitter about the divorce and didn't want me anywhere near the family. I got the second phone so David and Elena could reach me without his brother tracking it back to my number and starting something all over again. And then, once the stroke happened, it just became the phone I used for everything related to them. It was never about hiding something from you. It became about protecting them from someone else's mess. Why not just tell me all of this from the start?" Her eyes filled, finally, with the tears she'd clearly been holding back through the whole explanation. "Because you'd already lost your own father to a stroke, Ryan. I watched what that did to you. I didn't know how to bring this into our house, the wheelchair ramps, the slurred words, watching someone young go through exactly what your dad went through, without dragging you right back into that grief. I thought I was protecting you. I think, somewhere along the way, I just got quieter and quieter about it instead of actually protecting anyone. I sat with that for a long time. My father had died of a stroke 6 years earlier, right around the time Nora and I had gotten married, and she was right, I'd never fully talked about it, not with her, not with anyone. I'd buried it the way I buried most things, and apparently, without meaning to, I'd taught the person closest to me that certain kinds of pain simply weren't welcome at our kitchen table. We drove to the Blue House together 3 days later. Nora introduced me to David, who could speak now in slow, careful sentences, and to Elena, who hugged me like she'd known me for years, thanking me for, finally letting Nora bring you along. She talks about you all the time. David squeezed my hand with the working half of his and told me, haltingly, that Nora had saved his family more than once during the hardest months of his life. I started going with her regularly after that. Something about sitting with David, hearing him slowly relearn words, watching him fight his way back to himself an inch at a time, cracked something open in me that 6 years of quietly avoiding my father's memory never had. I finally talked about my dad, out loud, for the first time in years, sitting on that porch with the wheelchair ramp, while David listened and understood in a way almost no one else could. Nora and I are still married, 3 years later. The blue house isn't a secret anymore, it's just part of our life, the way David and Elena are part of our life. David walks with a cane now, slow but steady, and he still keeps that old cash phone in a drawer somewhere, half joking that it's the reason his best friend's marriage almost fell apart, and also, somehow, the reason it didn't. Elena and Nora are closer now than they were even before David's stroke, the kind of friendship that gets forged in hospital waiting rooms and 3 a.m. phone calls, the kind that doesn't need much explaining to anyone who's lived through something similar. Last spring, the 4 of us spent a weekend at a lake house together, David fishing off the dock with his one working hand while Elena laughed at something he'd said, and I remember standing there thinking that none of this existed, not really, the night I found that phone under the mattress and assumed the absolute worst about the person I loved most. I think about that night with the mattress and the charger sometimes, how close I came to blowing up my entire marriage over an assumption, before I actually knew a single real fact. The truth, it turns out, is rarely as simple as the story your fear writes for you in the dark. Sometimes the thing you're most afraid of finding is actually the thing that finally forces two people to stop hiding the parts of themselves they never learned how to share.